Thanks so much. And good evening, everyone, or good afternoon if you're on the West Coast, as I am, joining you today from San Francisco. Super excited to be working with you over the next hour or so. I have a fairly action-packed schedule prepared for you with a lot of different insights on the art of networking, which is this evening's topic. So networking is incredibly important for all people, no matter what career path you plan on taking. Your network is essentially your net worth in terms of being able to accomplish something grand. It's not just what you know, it's about who you know that can help you achieve whatever goal you set out to accomplish. So the angle of this evening's session will be very much from sort of the entrepreneurial perspective or the perspective of an innovator, because that's usually what I focus on in my job as an entrepreneur and as an investor, where I invest in early stage companies. I see constantly the importance of having a good network to be able to access the right people, whether you're trying to access the right people to establish connections for distribution of your new product, right? So if you're working in marketing, being able to have a professional network can open up doors and will dramatically accelerate your market access. But could also be in terms of landing your first job. Some of you might be graduating soon and interested in getting access to a job. It turns out most of the best jobs in the world are never actually published on sort of the more official channels. Those positions get filled through networks. So it's incredibly important to know a lot of people and to activate that network in an effective way. So we'll talk about how to build your personal brand, how to build a professional network, how to send and receive email introductions, and a lot of other things. So we'll cover a fair amount of topics in this session. The reason why this is, of course, relevant to all of you is that you're sort of, I assume, early in your careers. I know Fee here has a pretty wide audience, but it's my understanding that most of you are students. So what's interesting to look at is for the next sort of 5-10 years of your career, how are you going to plan that, and how are you going to land that first job that can be really the starting point for a super exciting career. But one of the things to keep in mind is that the traditional sort of career escalator, oh yeah, I'm sharing my slides, right? Yeah, I hope so. The traditional career escalator is really jammed at this point. The way it used to be that you would graduate from college or sometimes from high school, and you get an entry-level position somewhere, and then you will slowly sort of work your way up this career escalator at that same company, right? You would get promoted to project manager and then maybe department head. And if you did really well, you would become a director for a department and then maybe vice president and maybe CEO even, right? So at the end of your career, you sort of be able to, you've ridden this career escalator and you're ready to sort of jump off, right? And retire. But the problem today is that this career escalator is jammed all the way down. A lot of people are feeling fine at the end of their careers. They're not ready to retire, so they stay up here, and that jams the whole thing all the way down. So it becomes a lot more complicated to get an entry-level job. The other thing to keep in mind is that most of you are probably not interested in just working for one company for your entire career. A lot of young people today sort of jump around to different companies, and in order to do that effectively and to come across the best opportunities out there, you need to have a good network. So that's why this topic is important for all of us. One of the ways I like to look at sort of career planning and sort of life in general is that you can look at yourself as a startup, right? So whether or not you're planning on building a company yourself or joining a traditional sort of corporate career or working in government or nonprofits, you can look at your own life as a startup. Right? And what I mean by startup is that it's sort of like this nimble, agile organism that is always trying to create opportunities for itself, right? And that's what you are too, right? You are always trying to renew your skill set, build new skills, so that you can add value in a lot of different places. right? The more diverse sort of skill sets you have, and the more appealing your profile is, the more interesting opportunities you will come across. And it turns out that you can actually create your own luck. It's not just about sitting back and waiting. Even if you get a degree from a top university or a college, those opportunities are not going to present themselves just automatically. You need to seek it out. And what I find is that this startup mindset is super helpful in exploring those new opportunities. And there's actually a book called The Startup of You, written by Reid Hoffman and Ben Kashnica. Reid Hoffman is one of the founders of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a sort of a professional network. So as opposed to your other social networks, LinkedIn is where you have a profile that's highlighting all your professional accomplishments. So if you haven't yet created a LinkedIn profile, now is a good time to do that. I'm going to demonstrate that tool and show you how it works. It's free. And even I know some of you are high school students and you're like, well, this is why would I start building my professional network now? I'm going to go to college and blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out many of the classmates you have right now, the people in your network right now, will also 5 or 10 years from now be in really interesting positions at some great companies. And if you start building your network now, by the time you graduate from college, you're already going to have a huge head start compared to everyone else. And it's impossible to keep track of all those connections you have right now, 5 or 10 years from now, when you might need a connection at Tesla or at Microsoft or at some random company in Bangladesh, where you need to get in touch with the VP of engineering because you need some collaboration set up, whatever it might be. But if you've built your professional network, and I'll show you how it works, you can search on LinkedIn for that particular company, and then you can immediately see which of your connections work at that company. But the beautiful thing is that you can also see who of your connections work at that company. So there's sort of first degree connections, second degree connections, and even third degree connections. And you'll be able to then get an introduction to those people. And that means that it's a lot more likely that you will get a reply to that email. And that's one of the key sort of theses when it comes to networking, is that yes, you can reach out what's called cold to somebody, send a cold email or cold call somebody, which means that they've never heard about you before, right? You're not getting an introduction, you're just like calling somebody up. But it's sort of similar to when you probably get some of these marketing calls from random companies, and how likely are you to pick up the phone? Or when somebody starts talking to you that you don't know who they are, you usually just end up hanging up. And that's what happens if you don't get an introduction. So a big part of networking is by having this professional network, you will be able to get those introductions, and you will be able to then close deals much faster or get in touch with the people you're trying to talk to. So this book, I highly recommend it, called The Startup of You, that really talks about how you can be more creative in terms of the business model for yourself, so that you end up living a super exciting, super fulfilling, super impactful life down the line. All right, so some of you might be wondering, who is this dude with a weird accent? And you did hear a little bit about my bio, but just wanted to sort of reiterate that, yes, it's true. I have a strange accent because I grew up in this tiny little country called Denmark, right up here in Northern Europe. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So, and have sort of in the good spirit of FEE, I had the pleasure of actually joining FEEcon in 2019 as one of the keynote speakers, and I did a bunch of workshops on entrepreneurship, and because it's very well aligned with the sort of FEE philosophy that entrepreneurs obviously have a lot of freedom, right? Because we dictate. We don't have a boss usually. Sometimes you could sort of look at the CEO of a company is actually like the inverted pyramid, and you're at the bottom instead of at the top, because everyone is your boss. Your customers are your boss, your investors are your boss, your employees are your boss. So it's not as glamorous as it might seem. But nonetheless, you set your own hours, you choose what problem you want to focus on, what customer segments you're serving, you can build the team that you want to work with, and so on. So entrepreneurship in that sense is enormously liberating and quite exciting. And maybe we'll have another talk about entrepreneurialism. And for those of you who are interested in pursuing an entrepreneurial career, we can certainly talk about that. So today I live in Silicon Valley. I've been here for about a decade now. working as an entrepreneur in different tech startups. I'm also an investor now, investing in early stage companies. And then I love teaching entrepreneurship. And I have had the privilege of working with early stage founders in 25 countries around the world, as you can see here, quite a few different places. And I guest lecture at a number of different sort of top universities. I also work with a lot of large companies who are interested in becoming more innovative and entrepreneurial. So that's another point, that all of these companies that I see out there today, they're looking for entrepreneurial employees who are good at networking, good at looking for opportunities and looking at those problems as opportunities for new products and services that the company can build and take advantage of. So I work with a number of large companies that are interested in having more entrepreneurial employees. So that's, again, another good reason for you to consider, how can I become more entrepreneurial? How can I understand business, even though you want to be an art major or an engineer or a salesperson? It's super valuable to have that entrepreneurial mindset. All right, so another way to look at me, not just as my background in engineering and now as an entrepreneur, is that I'm sort of a product of the people that I know. You might have heard this quote that you are essentially the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. Have you ever heard that quote? Like, so you are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. So a really good point in relation to this is that if you want to be more successful in business, you should seek out people who are successful in business, because it's going to rub off on you, right? If you're trying to be a better musician, you should surround yourself with people who are into music, because just by surrounding yourself with those people, you're going to start getting into that world, right? You're going to hear different types of insights. You're going to get new perspectives. You're going to get introduced to that whole world of music, if that's your thing, or art, or engineering, or high tech, or whatever it might be. You want to be able to seek out those people and surround yourself with people who are similar or more like what you want to be, right? And on the flip side, if you find yourself right now sort of being surrounded by people who might not be the way you want to be, people who are negative, who are, instead of energy contributors, they're energy sort of suckers, or they don't really add any positive element to your life. I know this is really difficult, but some of the most important decisions in my life has been when I chose to essentially change my group of friends and change the type of people I surrounded myself with in a proactive way, because I wanted to do something else. I was tired of this particular group of people who maybe were like doing drugs or just like not motivated, not doing anything with their lives. And it's like, made that decision. And it's super difficult to say, well, I want something else for myself. And then sort of proactively started seeking out other groups of people. So this is a feature, as you can see here, it used to be a feature of LinkedIn where you could sort of map out your network. So all the blue dots you see here are all my connections to my university in Denmark, where I studied. And you can see that people then are interconnected. So what I have here is actually all my startup friends in San Francisco. And there's a lot of linkages, but there's also a lot of people who are not connected here. And then you have people over here who are like people from New York, from different business networks over there. And there's some loose connections, but it's sort of like interesting to map out that you have all these different pockets of people. So over the time of your career, you're going to also have a similar sort of groupings of people that you meet in different places, and there are going to be linkages in different ways. But it's just basically for you to see that it's a huge advantage to also have a diverse network, especially right now in your life where you might not know sort of where you're going to go and what you're going to do with your life. By trying to seek out networks in many different industries, in different age groups, in different physical locations, you're going to be able to have a much more nuanced view of the world, which is a huge advantage in terms of just for your understanding of the world and what's going on. You might have heard a lot about how in social media today is really dangerous because you end up getting sucked into these echo chambers, right? If you only have one group of friends and you only surround yourself with one group of people, you're going to start hearing the same things over and over again. And that can be super dangerous because you don't get that sort of diverse set of opinions. Okay, again, I'm going to introduce a couple of things here now, a tool so we can have a bit more interaction. Let's skip this. So I wanted to hear more about who you are and what you're working on, what you're struggling with, what are some of your challenges in relation to networking. But since I can't ask you to activate your microphones, I have created what's called a Miro board. Some of you might be familiar with this. It's essentially a virtual whiteboard. So I'm going to send you a link in the chat right now, and I'm going to show you how this tool works. And then we can start having a bit more interaction. So let's see here. Okay, so you guys get ready. I'm going to send you a link in the chat to everyone. Here we go. So hopefully you're able to see this. I see that you are. Awesome. So this tool is called Miro, and it's essentially a giant whiteboard. I can see you guys are popping in now. That's awesome. A couple of things on how to use Miro. So if you've never used this before, it's like a giant whiteboard. You can see it's like huge. Okay, and you can zoom in and out. You can zoom in and out either using your trackpad, which is like pinching your fingers, or you can use the little plus and minus sign here down in the right hand side corner. But like pinching your fingers also works. Initially, you might have what looking like a hand as a cursor, and then you can grab the canvas, move around, but you can't interact with the elements. So what you want to do is click this mouse icon here on the left-hand side, and now you can interact with the elements. So for example, you can zoom in here. So I can bring everyone to me, boom, and then you come over here, and then you can grab a sticky note. Okay, so you can take a sticky note, you sort of click the left-hand side on your trackpad, and then you can zoom in and say, hey, I'm a question. Okay, so then you can add questions. You can make it smaller and bigger, just like dragging it out. You can also create your own sticky notes here on the left-hand side panel. You click this sticky, you choose a color, and then you click wherever you want it to be. And then you can double click on a sticky note and you can write on it, okay? So if you have questions, feel free to just grab one of these stickies, put it somewhere here on the board, and I'll make sure to address those things. I have a question for you first. And my question for you is, in what ways can it be helpful to have a strong network? Okay, so I mentioned a couple of things earlier that it can be helpful in terms of landing a job, for example. So let's see if we can populate this and come up with a couple of ideas. I'm going to zoom in here and it's like to get a job interview. Okay, so that's one idea. And you just grab sticky notes and then write on them. And by the way, if it's super confusing that you can see other people's cursors, you can deactivate that up here, hide collaborators' cursors, like right next to, you see this smiley thing up here, just click on that blue thing and then, now you can't see other people's cursors. So it's a little less distracting. Okay, cool. I kind of like seeing how you zooming around here. It's kind of cool. All right, cool. So let me see what you're writing. We have here to learn about new jobs and opportunities. Yes, good point. What else? Somebody's writing to enhance your platform with others who share the same platform as you. Okay, yeah. So you get, it's a great thing for networking essentially. And to learn from other people could be a good reason to have a strong network. So it's not just in a job sense. It could also be for, let's say here for dating purposes. It's a good idea to have a strong network, right? It could be good for just like learning. Learning new things. It could be super useful when you're in a job and you're trying to solve problems. So if you have a problem you need to solve, this is something that I use all the time, right? Instead of me trying to solve this problem on my own, I can activate my network in a very powerful way and get other people to help me with this, right? So if I need help with digital marketing or help with 3D printing a product idea that I have in mind, or I need help with my like math homework, whatever it might be, right? There could be all kinds of things. If you have a good network, you can very quickly access the types of people who has the answer to that question. All right, awesome. So you guys can keep working on this. And another thing I wanted to show you right now while we're on the Miro is that down here, I'm just gonna, I know this is gonna suck, but I'm gonna bring you all to me so you can see what's going on. All right, cool. So you can see out here, there's sort of a bunch of individual little work areas, and you can zoom into one of those and you can grab it by writing your name on it. So for example, I write my name here, and then for this is basically for you to just reflect on a couple of things, and this board will remain active after the session as well. So I had just to add a couple of questions here for you. Instead of what professional goals do you have for the next 5 years? For example, right? It's like, well, I want to land a job. I want to make, get to a 6-figure salary. I want to find the love of my life. I want to, whatever, I guess that's not a professional goal, but it could be all kinds of goals, honestly. And then you write down some of the different professional goals that you have, okay? So you should go and grab your own workboard, and then it will be all for you instead of like co-creating this. The next question is, who can help you accomplish those goals? So try to reflect on what type of people might be able to help you accomplish that goal much faster, right? So if you're trying to land a job, it could be like, well, a recruitment manager, right? Right? Recruiters in the industry where you're trying to get a job, for example. Or it could be an employee at the company, right? Employees at the company where you want to get a job, right? There could be a lot of different types of people, and then try to be specific. It's like, well, okay, who do I know in terms of recruiters? Oh, wait, I actually did meet that person playing tennis. Who has a friend who's in that industry, right? So you can then try to be specific, and then you can connect that here and say, okay, yeah, my tennis trainer's friend is a recruiter, right? And then you say, oh, well, actually, there's also somebody like my mom's yoga instructor, right? You might know a lot of people if you just start sort of thinking about this and try to reflect on, well, who do you know and who do you have access to? Try to make a list of all those people and then figure out, well, how can I actually activate my current network to get access to those people, and go and make an ask. So this is one of the key things in this world today, is that most people just don't ask, right? I've been giving out my personal email to over 10,000 students all over the world. And I keep doing that because it's so rare that somebody actually takes me up on it. But for the few people who do reach out, I try to help them out with job connections, finding co-founders, getting access to funding. Not that I can promise I can deliver all those things, but I really like helping out people. And that's how networking works. But you can only get those benefits if you actually ask. And that's one of the things we'll talk about today, is that how can you create a powerful personal elevator pitch so that people understand who you are, what you're working on, and what you need, right? And the last thing is maybe the most important one, that you need to have an ask, right? If you don't ask people for help, they're not going to help you. So that's a really key thing. So think about, what are your goals for the next 5 years? Who can help you accomplish these goals? Where and how can you access those people? What is your personal elevator pitch? So here you can actually double click again, and you can write down some notes on who you are, what you're working on, or what you're trying to do, and what is your ask. And at the end of the day today, you will be able to write down some action items on what you're going to do to improve your personal network over the next 6 months. All right, cool. So yeah, feel free to grab one of these. I see people are working on it here. It's awesome. Hey, Christina, working on some cool stuff. Awesome. Yes, PhD advisors. Okay, PhD in economics. That's great. Awesome goals all around. Yeah, so feel free to like jot down some notes. And again, this link here, if you just copy paste that to a notepad or whatever, this link will remain active after the session as well. And again, if you have any questions for me, just drop them over here and I'll make sure to address those questions as we go through it here. All righty, so I have a couple more things since there's no more questions at this moment. Let's see here. Okay. Yes, so why do we need to network and why is it valuable to have a powerful professional network? Well, as I mentioned before, like the best jobs are never advertised, right? Are never advertised. And the other point here that's incredibly important is that your ability to get a job and keep that job and grow in that career and be successful in life is not determined based on your actual skills. This is a weird statement, but it's true. 85% of it is funny, it's the same percentage, but research shows essentially that, and it was research done at, let me see here, I believe it was Stanford University, Carnegie Mellon Foundation at Harvard, found out that, or at least 80% of your sort of ability to get a job and keep it is about your people skills, not your sort of hard technical skills, right? So your technical skills and knowledge only account for about 15 to 20% of your actual success in an industry. So I'm not discouraging you from paying attention to school. It's definitely important to build up those hard skills as well. But it's also important to build your people skills, right? Your social skills and your communication skills. And I've certainly seen that in my career, that pretty much all the exciting opportunities that I've come across, the best investments I've made, the best career moves I've made, the best deals that I've landed over my career has always come through my network, right? It's like these random coincidences, but it's not that random. And at least what happens is that if you start building your network and you're seeking out different things, you're being proactive about accessing more people, getting yourself out there, going to networking events, going to conferences, like talking to people who are different from you, who might have some interesting perspectives. All of a sudden, these like magical opportunities just appear. So that's really cool. And let's now talk about what you can do to make that happen. And also, some of you might have certain fears when it comes to networking. Again, feel free to write them down on the Miro board under the question section there, and we can talk about that. If you haven't found the Miro board yet, just go into the chat here, the Zoom chat, click on that link, and you go straight into Miro. All right, so there are many different topics we can dive into in relation to networking, right? Because there is physical networking, like when you go to a networking event or you're at a conference. Many of these conferences are great, but the real magic is not just sitting in the main room, sort of listening to the presenters. The real magic is actually what happens in between the sessions, where you get to talk to the other attendees and you get to talk to the speakers. That's where the magic happens, because that's where you build connections with other human beings that could help advance your career or help you solve problems or whatever it might be. So there are a lot of different aspects into being a good networker that we'll try to cover here. Anything from like voice control and body language to handshake to dress code to business cards to introductions and all that stuff. One of the key things is that you want to be able to stand out when it comes to a networking event, right? There are sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at these large events, and you need to give people a reason not to forget you. And what I've found to be the most powerful way to do that is to highlight some of the things that makes you most excited, right? So try to think about something that gives you, that highlights something you're really passionate about, right? So when you talk about, if you have a company, most entrepreneurs are very passionate about their company. But if you don't have a company, it could also be a hobby of yours or an interest of yours or some country you want to travel to or whatever it might be. But there are a couple of different things where you sort of know with yourself, like every time you talk about that topic, you get really excited and passionate. And that's what you want to talk about. And certainly if you're pitching a startup idea, it's always a good idea to go back to talking about the problem you're solving and the story about how you got excited about this problem that you want to solve with your startup, right? Most entrepreneurs have some kind of personal story that they can highlight and explain. It's like, well, it happened in this particular setting when I was I was 12 years old and my dad told me this and that. And then, or I went to this country and I saw, for example, I was listening to this great podcast with the founder of Tom's Shoes the other day, and he was traveling in Argentina and sort of as a backpacker. And at some point at the end of his trip, he got invited to go out and sort of help donate shoes to all these kids living in these like really poor areas outside of Buenos Aires. And he realized this problem that there are all these kids around the world who don't have access to shoes because they are very poor. And that has a tremendous effect about their ability to go to school. They get blisters and all kinds of wounds because they don't have shoes on their feet. They can't play the same way without shoes. So that was sort of how he got really interested in solving this problem. And that ended up starting this journey for him to start Tom's Shoes, where the business model is that every time you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, Tom's will donate a pair of shoes to a child who needs a pair, right? So it's like buy a pair, give a pair. And he invented that business model, which is really fascinating. And now Tom's Shoes has grown into $1 billion company, right? Because it resonated with people that there is a way to do good while making money. So that story is something that people can relate to. And trust me, every time he talks about this story, you can just see him lighting up. You can just see how passionate and excited he is about this mission. And that's what you want to do at a networking event when you're trying to meet people. You want to have some of that passion shine through. Okay, so you want to have some kind of elevator pitch where you have something punchy and ideally memorable about you, right? You want to tell a story that people can repeat so they can help open other doors for you, right? You want to stand out, but you also want to make sure that it's simple enough. If you're, again, pitching a startup, that the idea is so simple that people can repeat it so that they can help you open up those doors. Another really important element when it comes to networking is that it's not just about what you say, it's also how you say it. And it's not just about the technical aspects of your idea or your hard skills as an individual. It's all about also about talking about the heart, right? That's really what drives people to take action. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And you got to create your message so that it gets people to have an emotional reaction. Some of you might have heard of Simon Sinek. If you haven't heard of Simon Sinek, you should go and check out this book called Start With Why. There's also a really good free TED Talk called Start With Why. Maybe I'm gonna see if I can find this here. TED Talk. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna share that in the chat. Cool. Check out that TED Talk later today. So Simon talks about this concept of the golden circle and how good communicators actually communicate from inside of this golden circle. Most people know, if you're talking in a company, they know what the company is doing. Like they know what kind of products they're offering. Some people know how they build those products, but very few employees typically know why the company is doing what it's doing. And the same with individuals. Like you might know what somebody is doing, like what your parents are working with or working on, and so on. Maybe you know how they do it, but why do they do what they do, right? But it turns out the why is actually the most fascinating thing about people. And now going back to talking about networking events, nobody really likes product pitches, right? Pitches are boring. After a while, nobody really cares. But what we do care about is stories. Like we've been trained through generations to learn from stories. And your story is always interesting to me, right? So instead of pitching what you're doing and how you're doing it, talk about why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because then it becomes personal and it becomes about the story and it becomes infinitely more interesting. So a really good trick when it comes to networking is to talk about why. And tell me a story about why you're interested in solving this problem or why you're interested in getting this job at this company. And I'll be a lot more likely to actually want to help you out. So that's another good trick. Okay, so back to you. What is your why? And this is a really important question, and I know it's a big question. It's a hard one to answer, but I strongly urge you to reflect a bit on this. And you can do this on the Miro board. You can do this on a notepad at home, whatever it is. But the most successful people I know are people who have a very strong understanding of their why. Like when they got up from bed in the morning every day, why? What are they excited about, right? What is that why that drives them every day? Christina mentioned, like, well, she wants to get a PhD in economics, maybe because she wants to create change in a certain industry, right? So you need to figure out what is that why that drives you, because the stronger you have defined your why, the more driven you're going to be, the more likely you're going to be to overcome all those obstacles that will inevitably come up. And you're just going to get back to that course. And when things get hard, and it certainly gets hard if you're planning on starting a business, you will be able to go through that because you have that strong sense of purpose. So I actually would like this little exercise for you right now. And I guess we can't actually go into breakout rooms. I was hoping and fantasizing about how we would be able to do this, but I guess we cannot do that in this format here today. But what I'd like you to do is just take a moment for yourself, and you can write on the Miro board, you can write on a notepad, whatever it might be, and jot down a few notes about what makes you interesting and unique. Okay, I know this can be a hard one for those who are more prone to being sort of humble and not too braggy. But what makes you interesting and unique? Because thinking about a networking session, right? When you meet somebody for the first time and you want to stand out in the crowd, you need to have something that makes you memorable. Right? So figure out, maybe you have some kind of odd hobby, maybe you have some crazy interest that you've been collecting stamps since you were like 5 years old, or you are a world champion in drinking water while standing on two hands, right? Doing a handstand, or whatever it might be, like something kind of wacky, interesting feature of yours, an interest or a passion, whatever it might be. Have a couple of different things, because one of the other things I find is that when you're at a networking event, it's less so about just pitching your own idea. It's about finding things you can connect on. Like human beings are always trying to find commonalities. So I heard this the other day. It's kind of an interesting saying that the most interesting people, the most interesting person in the room is the most interested. So, and what you can use that for is, like, many of you are early in your careers and you might go to these networking events and you're like, well, who am I to, why am I interesting, right? I'm just a student. Well, it turns out the most interesting person in the room is the most interested. So you will be able to create a good connection with some like really successful person in the room, maybe the keynote speaker or one of the other attendees who's like way ahead of you in terms of career. But if you just apply this like hat of curiosity and you ask questions, you're going to make them feel that they're really feel really good about themselves, because everyone loves to talk about themselves. So that's a really good trick, especially if you're like super early in your career and you don't feel comfortable maybe talking so much about your own accomplishments and things like that. Just ask questions, be curious, right? And try to come up with some more intelligent questions. So maybe you've read up about, if you're trying to have a connection with the speaker at a conference, for example, try to make sure that you read up a little bit about their work. Or when you come up to speak to them after you've listened to their keynote presentation, for example, you can try to come up with like a contrarian point or ask them to elaborate on one of the examples they gave during the presentation or whatever it might be, right? But be curious and ask questions. And that's another great way to reconnect with people. Okay, I'm just going to jump over to the mirror board and see if there are questions. And there are a couple of questions. Okay, cool. Let me just share this here. So there are a couple of questions here. What businesses have you started? So I want to share a couple of things on that note, but really what I urge you to do is I'm going to share my Scheel. Let me see here on YouTube. I'm just going to share this talk that I gave at FECON 2 years ago, because I actually go through more in greater examples, like what were the businesses I started, because we only have 15 minutes left. I'm not going to be able to tell you all about this, but in general, I've started 2 different consulting companies. I've started a tech company selling used computer equipment. Today I have an entrepreneurship education company, and I also started that up in Vietnam. I've started a company in gaming, so building educational games for teens who are also trying to learn the English language. And then now I'm partner in this venture fund where we invest in early stage companies. So that's sort of, and then I've been an advisor to a number of different companies in several different industries. And again, check out that talk in the link, because that will give you a bit more, a few more insights on this. How do I network more effective when I'm very shy? That's an awesome question. Thanks for asking that question. So one of the things, I actually just mentioned a couple of good points in relation to this, that the most interesting person in the room is the most interested. So instead of you going to a networking event with the intention or this sort of notion that, oh, I have to go pitch myself and I have to go talk about myself all the time, instead, it might be easier to look at this in a way as like, hey, I'm going to this event to meet other people and to learn about other people. Right. But of course, you do need to get over this initial sort of anxiety around just going up to a stranger and talking to them, which can be really daunting. And I have a couple of sort of practical, tactical tips in relation to that. And Morgan just posted a feedback thing. So we'd love to hear from you if this topic is interesting and if we should do more of these events. But yeah, so specifically for those who are shy, a couple of different tips. Let me see if I can actually find the slide for this. Well, first of all, this is a really good exercise. So it's like, make sure that you have written down a couple of notes about how you want to present yourself. Like, what is your elevator pitch? What are the things about you and what you're working on that you want to highlight? Maybe tell a story about you in a particular situation where you came across whatever you're passionate about right now. And then make sure that you highlight what you're looking for, and you formulate this, what I call an opening sentence or opening statement, which is like the first sentence you're going to use when you are asked, so, hey, Sandy, who are you and what are you working on? Right, that you have this like sentence prepared in your mind will make it a lot easier. And then a couple of other things when it comes to networking. Yeah, this is actually, let's dive into this really quickly and then we'll do some more questions. Okay, so do's and don'ts in terms of networking, right? One of them is like, don't be too overdressed and don't be too underdressed either, right? So like, try to figure out what is the dress code here, and try not to dress in a way that's like too distracting either. Could also come across as less professional and be sort of counterproductive. And the other thing is that people, again, don't like pitches, but they love stories. So if you have a story about the product you're building, why, again, going back to the why sentence, you're building what you're building, that's a great starting point. Another thing to keep in mind, especially also if you're shy, I have a couple of points on this here, is that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Right? You probably know about this, right? In class, you've experienced great educators who are able to just like captivate the audience and make everyone really interested. And then on the contrary, you've been in classes where the teacher is like standing up, reading their own slides, and nobody pays attention, right? So it turns out it's not what you say, it's how you say it. 50+% of what people take away from a presentation is actually non-verbal cues, which is fascinating, right? And then you have 38%, which is your voice, your intonation, like how do you use your voice? And only 7%, according to this study here, is the words you used in the presentation. So this is fascinating because if you think about when you're preparing a presentation, what do you usually practice? Right? What do you spend 93% of the time on your speech, right? On the text, you write it out, you prepare a presentation in the actual words you're going to say. But it turns out nobody's going to remember the words you used, but they will remember the feeling they had during your presentation. Nobody's going to remember the words you used. They're going to remember the feeling they had during your presentation. And it turns out what affects that feeling is all the nonverbal stuff and your intonation. So a good idea, if you want to be a better presenter and a better networker, is to practice some of the things. Like make sure you know how to carry yourself, right? That you stand up straight, that you have a nice, firm, confident handshake, that you know how to have eye contact with people. So they're not like the shy person standing over in the back of the room looking at your shoes when you're talking to people, right? And there are a couple of techniques you can use to practice this. One of the things is like you can practice your body language. And there's a technique developed by a Harvard researcher named Amy Cuddy called power posing. I'm going to share this in the chat again. It's called power posing. You can look that up on YouTube. She has a great TED talk on it, and there's a bunch of research on this power posing stuff. But essentially what it is that before a networking event, or even before a job interview, or before a date, or before an exam, if you take a sort of what's called a hyper-masculine position, body position, for about 30 seconds or more, before entering that room, or before the exam, or before the date, whatever, or before that big presentation, before you get up on stage, you take a hyper sort of masculine position. And that could be either sitting in the back of a chair with your arms behind your head. It could be standing up straight with your arms above your head and screaming, yes! It could be just like doing the Wonder Woman pose that you see down there, but you're standing up straight and you sort of get your body to feel powerful. And when you feel powerful, the audience will perceive you as powerful. So it's an incredibly powerful thing if you want to come across as somebody who is competent, likable, professional, and all those other things. So the body language is really important. And especially if you're shy, this can sort of amp up your confidence a bit. Because when you enter that room, people are going to immediately judge you, and they're going to immediately sort of make up some kind of impression of you. And you want that impression to be positive. Okay. Business cards, we're not going to talk so much about this. Yeah, so having a positive self-image is incredibly important, right? That you don't go into that room thinking, oh no, who am I? I don't have any accomplishments. I'm not that smart. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. Like you need to have positive self-talk so that you say, well, yeah, I'm early in my career and I'm still a student, but I'm going to do great things in the world. And of course, I'm worthy of other people's of having a conversation with somebody, right? So positive self-talk and having that positive image and tell yourself that you're good enough is really important when you go into an event. The handshake, clean hands, firm and confident. Look people in the eyes. Don't look down. Have eye contact when you shake people's hands, right? Also, don't go overboard and do like the bone-crushing handshake. That's also not good. But essentially, like a nice, firm handshake is good. Smile and be positive. That's another thing about networking. People are attracted to happy people, right? You want to be where the party is at. If people are like all grumpy and like complaining about their, spouse, or complaining about all the things that are hard in life, you're going to repel people, right? If you're smiling and open, that's going to make people a lot more interested in talking to you. Then a few sort of tricks learned the hard way. Make sure not to have too much lettuce in your teeth. And secondly, for the guys specifically, make sure that your fly is closed, right? When you're about to go to that networking event. I speak from experience that it's very unfortunate when you get back from a 2-hour networking event and you realize your white shirt has been sticking out of your fly the whole time. So check yourself before entering that room. Another thing in terms of networking, and this is more general, is that there's this sort of unwritten rule about the sort of give and get equation, right? So what I call the networking equation. So you don't want to overexploit your key contacts. If you just keep asking and asking and asking for favors, maybe you have some of those friends who keep doing this, but at some point you're just going to feel depleted and you're just going to feel like, well, I'm not getting anything out of this relation, and you're going to stop being willing to share anything with those people. So really important that you keep in mind how many favors you've asked for, so that you don't sort of overexploit some of those connections. Okay, the final thing I wanted to share, and then I'm going to go back to Q&A here, is in relation to sort of how you manage your professional network. And again, I wanted to share that the best tool to manage your professional network is free, and it's called LinkedIn. Okay, this is the icon. It's called linkedin.com. And if you don't have that yet, you can create a free profile, and this is a great way to manage your professional network. I can show you here live. This is what my LinkedIn looks like. Okay, so linkedin.com, you can create a profile there. And in here, you can manage all your connections. And the way this works is that it's sort of like a feed similar to Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, where people post different articles. But the really interesting thing here is in relation to your network. So you see here, I have 4,300 contacts or connections in LinkedIn that I can write to directly. And of course, it's impossible for me to keep track on what all these 4,300 people are doing. So the way LinkedIn works is that, for example, I needed to contact somebody who works at Facebook, right? So then I can say Facebook in people, okay? And then I can say my connections, I only want to see my first degree connections. So these are people I am linked up with directly, that I know that I can message right away. So I say first degree connections and show results. And now I can see I have 359 people who are my first degree connections who currently work, or here I can say at Facebook, for example. Okay, and then I can see show results. So I have 12 connections who work at Facebook right now. So if I needed to talk to engineering, I could talk to Nick here, who's a software engineer at Facebook. Okay, and if this was, for example, and if I needed to a specific location, I could say, well, I need somebody who's also in San Francisco Bay Area. It's like that's 10 out of the 12, right? What if it's not Facebook? What if it's Tesla, for example? I'm not sure if I know anyone at Tesla. Okay, so I don't know anyone in the Bay Area working at Tesla. I could delete this and see if I work. No, I don't know anyone at Tesla. That's fascinating. Maybe because I have it up here. Okay, let's see something else. Let's see Microsoft. You get the idea anyway. That I can find connections who are working at a particular company, and that, it's because I'm still searching for Facebook. That's why it didn't work with Tesla. But anyway, but now I could go to this person, I can message them directly, right? And the other cool thing is that what if I needed to talk to somebody at Tesla, right? Who's working at Tesla, and it's not just I can see first degree connections. Okay, I have 5 people that are currently working at Tesla, but I need more people. Then I can say first and second degree connections. So now I'm showing also the people connections of my connections. And then I can see who we have in common. So for example, if I needed to talk to Drew here, who is the Senior Vice President of Powertrain, I can go and see that we share these these connections are my shared connections that know this gentleman here, right? So then I can go and I can talk to Scott and say, hey, Scott, can you send me an intro to Drew because I need to talk to him, right? And because I'm going through my connections, that's something that will work really well. Okay, so those were a couple of points on how powerful LinkedIn is, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you check it out. So I realize we are pretty much out of time. If people have questions, I wanted to share my personal email here with you. If I can help out in any way going forward, feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn. You can find me at linkedin.com/in/Henrik Scheel. And also, you're very welcome to go into, email me directly here. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to share here today, and I'm going to go back to the Miro board and see if there are any more questions. I'm happy to hang out a little bit more. But as a special treat for all of you who joined here today, I actually just this week launched a brand new online entrepreneurship course. And because of fee here, I wanted to offer a highly discounted rate to all of you guys. So if you're interested in an entrepreneurship course, you can get access to this course at a 50% discount using this link I'm going to send you here in the chat, and would love to have you learn with me and be part of this cohort of entrepreneurship students. So if anyone is interested in that, would love to keep in touch. And then over to you, Morgan. And I'm going to go back to the Miro and see if there's any more questions I might be able to answer here. Not sure if we have a super hard stop. Go ahead.
Oh, no, we don't. If you want to keep doing questions, we can. I actually have a question for you. Yeah. Did you ever talk about your why?
Did I talk about my why? Yeah, so I have a couple different whys, depending on what business. But my main occupation right now is running Startup Experience, which is an entrepreneurship education company. And the why for that business and what has really kept me going here for the last decade is that I believe that we can change the world. We can solve a lot of big problems in the world if we inspire and train a new generation of entrepreneurial-minded young people. So that is the why. That's what keeps me going. And that's why it helps me. I travel to Papua New Guinea or Costa Rica or India. I train teachers so that they can teach entrepreneurship. I trained a bunch of students and now online launching this course because I really think that having that entrepreneurial mindset is going to be so important in a world that's changing so fast, where all these exponential technologies are rapidly disrupting all industries. And I don't want to see young people without a job and ended up in some job that doesn't make sense for them. So having this power of an entrepreneurial mindset and tool set and skill set where you can create your own opportunities is something that I strongly believe in. And you can see that I'm passionate about it, right? So that's a good thing to find a why that keeps you going.
Yeah, I love it. We're at 7, but you can keep going with questions. I'm loving it, and we still have a lot of people online, so keep going if you want to.
Yeah, very cool. So I see here up on the Miro board, and if there are any more folks who want to join the Miro board, I'm just going to post it in the chat here one more time. What I see up here right now is a couple other questions. How do I find networking events relevant to my industry? So there are a couple of different ways, depending on where you're located, right? That's also another important point, that you want to surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do ultimately. And if you're early in your career, it's really important that you go to a place where you can optimize for learning, right? I always advise my students, the first job you take, just try to optimize for learning. Don't necessarily take the job that will pay you the most, but take the job where you can learn the most, right? You take a job from a really great, where you have a great manager and you have a great opportunity to learn a lot. A steep learning curve is so important. So networking events, oftentimes you can find those if you just search on Google. You can find networking events, especially if you're in one of the major cities, right? If you're in Denver or New York or Miami or LA or San Francisco, wherever it might be, Chicago, there will be different types of event sites. So for example, Eventbrite is a good place to search for things. Eventbrite.com. So for example, if you and you can also just Google events if you're into something in particular, but here's eventbrite.com, and for example, if I search here, I search what could it be? It could be like energy, and then I can search specifically for events that are going on in my location or specific dates. So that could be one thing. Or if I'm searching, maybe I'm interested in something else. I'm interested in new tech. That's pretty broad. There's like a ton of events going on here in San Francisco. And many of these events are you just join in. So like this is a tech career fair, for example, right? And then I can go in and I can read about this event and I can sign up. So Eventbrite is a good place. And generally speaking, also just like Google it and you will find different networking sites and different industry forums and professional sort of forums. Okay, how do I start a networking if I'm moving to a new country? Okay, so how do I get started on networking if I'm moving to a new country? Again, get yourself out there, right? Attend a lot of events, join social clubs. So that's another really big part of networking, is that most of the biggest deals are not closed in the conference rooms. They're actually closed at the golf course or the tennis court or while trail running or whatever it is, right? So another important thing is that start joining like social clubs, right? I've met a ton of great business connections through triathlons or through kiteboarding or through rock climbing, or you don't have to do extreme sports, by the way, but there are lots of like great ways of sort of socially getting involved with people and then ultimately using that for business too. Okay, can you give me an example of a time where networking led to a new job or a business opportunity? I can give you like 100 examples of those because that's pretty much everything I've done in my career. All the opportunities I've come across has been through like random connections. I send out like 5 or 10 email introductions every single week, and I get a ton of email introductions all the time. The reason why I'm still here in the Bay Area was that I met my wife through a through a friend of mine. So that was a connection. And then a business opportunity was that a friend of mine introduced me to the education manager at Intel at the time. When I wanted to start doing this entrepreneurship education thing, he sent out an email introduction, and then I ended up jumping on the phone with this gentleman named Manav from Intel, and I ended up securing essentially like a pilot project for a startup experience entrepreneurship workshop, and that ended up essentially kickstarting this entrepreneurship company of mine. But it's like these introductions happen all the time, especially for investments. We rarely invest in a founder who doesn't come through an introduction. I don't think we've invested in 70 plus companies, and I don't think a single one of those companies have been somebody who just reached out to us cold. It always comes through a friend, right? Because it builds trust. So that's why it's important to have a big network, because the more people you know, the more people they know, and then you can ask for an introduction to somebody. And today I didn't get to share a ton of stuff about how to send introductions. I'm happy to go through some of the things if you want to do that or look into this too. Otherwise, I do actually have a couple of videos on networking that I can share with you. So just send me an email and I'm happy to share that with you. Okay, henrik@startupxp.com. How do I network more effectively when I'm shy? We already covered this. Cool. I think we covered the questions now, and we are a bit over time. But once again, it's just been awesome speaking with you this evening. I hope to hear from many of you, and I wish you all the best of luck going forward, using some of these networking skills to create awesome opportunities for yourself. So yeah, best of luck out there, building your networks and creating great opportunities for yourself.